harmony. And today, in an extension of this, he's going to show us how this very rich tradition was, even though we speak of classical Indian theatre, was not at all exclusively classical, not at all exclusively Sanskrit, and it was both regional as well as pan-Indian. Professor Bharat Gupta, for those who join us now, is a well-known cultural exponent of classical Indian art and literature and Indian aesthetics. He's also studied classical Greek culture and theatre in particular quite in depth, and written on the comparison between these two traditions. And he's written texts on classical, on Dharma Shastras, also on the dramatic concepts, Greek and Indian, and on India, a cultural decline or revival. So he's been at the center of many of these important cultural issues, and he's been recently trustee of the Indira Gandhi National Center for the Arts and promoting a lot of cultural activities under that banner. So with this brief introduction, Bharatji, I will request you to take the stage and complete your journey through Indian theatre.
Namaskar everybody. So I begin with a auspicious verse in praise of Shiva. Ganga Taranga Ramaniya Jata Kalapam Gauri Nirantar Vibhushitavam Bhagam Narayanam Priyamananga Madapaharam Varanasi Purapatim Bhaj Vishwanatham. Welcome friends to the second part of this talk, and I will be talking about how classical or ancient Indian theatre was not regional, but it was an all-India theatre, and it was drawing upon everything that happened in various parts of the country. Now, the question that arises is, how do we know? Is it an interpretation of mine? Or do we have grounds to believe, as described in the Natya Shastra or in the ancient plays of the great playwrights like Kalidasa, Bhasa and others? Well, as a matter of fact, it is both the ancient text of the plays as well as the Natya Shastra that talks about the all-India characteristic, the pan-Indian characteristic of ancient Indian theatre. The Natya Shastra, as a matter of fact, is all the time targeting what we may call today as a matter of something much closer to our lives, practically, a pan-Indian audience. An audience which comes from all over the country, and a set of players or a tradition of performers who go all over the country. It is not that they are just regional players. You see, today, Kudiyattam players, although they perform all over India and now outside India as well, they come from a region of India and they are known as Theatre of Kerala. Similarly, Bhavai belongs to Gujarat. Baul songs and Baul performers, they belong to Bengal. And that is why sometimes these so-called folk forms are always called regional forms or traditional, belonging to a region. Now, ancient Indian theatre was simply not that. It was drawing from the whole of the country. The first thing to observe about that is that it was the only multilingual theatre that we have in history. You see, the theatre of Greece was played in the city-states, and the great performers and the great playwrights, they all belonged to the region of Attica. And Attic Greek was largely the language of ancient Greek plays and the dialects around it. Similarly, when we think of other theatres, let's say British theatre, then we think of theatre that started with Christopher Marlowe, Shakespeare and all that. This is 1594 onwards. So it belongs to a region and belongs to a language. That's why you always call French theatre, German theatre, English theatre, and in modern times we say Bengali theatre, Tamil theatre, Hindi theatre, etc., etc. But this was not the case with ancient Indian theatre. As I was trying to tell you yesterday, it is not Sanskrit theatre. This term was used for the first time by Western Indologists to describe something called classical theatre. You see, they came and said, do you have a classical theatre? Yes. Somebody said, we have Kalidas. And then they said, okay, then classical theatre of India is Kalidas, and Kalidas is the Shakespeare of India or Aeschylus of India, whatever. But this is not true. Because if you look at any ancient plays, the characters are speaking in 5 to 6 to 7 languages. And the principle followed is different. The principle is of loka anukarana, or imitation. That is, theatre is going to reflect life as it is found. It is going to reflect the true nature of that life and the people, the characteristics of the people, the ethos of the people on the stage. So it's going to reflect them in every way. Their whole hierarchy, their whole social status, their regional characteristics, their habits, their food, their costume, and their speech, their bhasha. So Natya Shastra says very clearly, in a very detailed account which is found in the 17th chapter, that there is Sanskrit which is used by the kings, the learned sages, scholars, grammarians, students, Vedabhyasi Brahmanas, or highly learned courtesans, These are the people who speak Sanskrit. But the queens, the people of the royal household, ordinary people, various other mendicants, saints, orders, people of religious order, they all speak what is called Prakrit. Now, what was Prakrit? Prakrit were the languages which, how should we define? Let's say which was spoken naturally by the people, or they are given languages. They are not refined and sophisticated like Sanskrit, but they are languages that change with time. Sanskrit is a language which soon after the Vedic period was deliberately made to freeze. It was a miracle performed in India so that a language could be available throughout the country and for centuries and centuries to come. So I can read Kalidas, although he was 2,500 years ago, because the language of something in which a modern Sanskrit playwright may write or a poet may compose is the same language. So the language is the same language. It may be called a frozen language or a dead language by some linguists, but it is a language which has this whole body of literature, thousands of works in it. But other than that, there were the living languages called Prakrit. So the Prakrits were spoken by various other characters. Shakuntala would not speak Sanskrit. Dushyant would speak Sanskrit, and Shakuntala, who was called Saundala, she was not even called Shakuntala but Saundala in Prakrit, she would speak a Prakrit. Now there were various kinds of Prakrits depending upon the region of India, just as there are so many modern Indian Prakrits or languages. So briefly speaking, we had Saurashtri in Saurashtra, we had Balik, which is northern Punjab, Afghanistan region. We had Prachya, which would be perhaps the region of Uttar Pradesh, North Uttar Pradesh. Then we had Banga or Okar Bahula languages. Now, Bengali and Udiya are still Okar Bahula. They don't say Jala, they say Jala. So there is a tendency to use O all the time. So it describes the languages of that region. Then there was Dramil, what is now called Tamil. The older name for that is Dramil. And they say that there is this language, Dramil. Then there was language of Kerala. Then there was language of Andhri. And then there was the language around Uttar Pradesh and the language in Madhya Pradesh. So I'm just giving you a very quick summary of what were the languages that existed. You have all the details that you like to read in the 17th chapter. And various characters spoke in these languages. All the music was sung in these languages. The common songs were sung in the languages. Music is something which was extremely pivotal to ancient Indian theatre. And in order to make things delightful and sweet and soft and enticing, a lot of music had to be used. And all the kinds of songs which were inserted into ancient plays, they were in Prakrits. You see, if you try to imagine a performance as it happened 2000 years ago, then it would be entirely different from what we see as dialogue-based performance anywhere in the world today. All ancient theatres were almost 60 to 70% of music. Only 20 to 30% of it was what we call today dialogue. The rest was all song. This was true of ancient Greek theatre, this was true of ancient Indian theatre. And the text that you see today as a printed text which comes before you as work of Kalidas, Vikramur Varshiyam, or by another author, Swapnavasav Dattam. Now, that work is only the dialogue portion, or what was called the Path. Path today means, in modern Indian languages, something which is read. Sah Pathati today means one who reads. But in ancient times, Pathati means one who enunciates, one who speaks out aloud. So the Path content, the dialogue content was in all these various languages. And characters would reflect. So if somebody came from south of India, let's take an example. The fisherman who brings the lost ring of Shakuntala to Dushyant's court. Let's presume, or let us say that the director wanted it so. He makes him a person from Kerala. So he would then speak the language of Kerala. Or in modern times, he should speak Malayali. He would be dressed like that, he would walk like that, and he would speak like that. And he would speak that language. Now you would say, well, how is it that ancient Indians understood all these languages? You see, these are questions that come to your mind as an audience. Did everybody who went to theatre know 5 languages or 6 languages? If he or she didn't know those languages, then how would they follow the dialogue? Well, the truth of the matter is that nobody wanted to follow the dialogue exactly as it was. The ancient audience wanted to see so many things going on there. They wanted to see dance. Somebody was more interested in dance. Somebody was more interested in action. Somebody was more interested in music. Somebody was more interested in perfect enunciation. There is a verse in Natya Shastra which says that Acharya samam icchanti. Those who are great experts of theatre, Acharya, they want everything in proper measure and they enjoy everything. Acharya samam icchanti, vyaktam icchanti pandita. And the scholars want that all the words and the languages are spoken correctly. So the scholars would understand all the 5 and 6 languages, Sanskrit included. Narya madhuram icchanti. The bulk of the audience, which were women, Narya madhuram icchanti, they want some sweet things. Sweet things means they want romantic scenes, they want very beautiful songs, they want nice dances. Narya madhuram icchanti. And those who are neither women, nor acharyas, nor scholars, what do they want? Well, they want action. Vikrushtam itare janaha. Those who are neither of these 3 categories, they want a lot of contests, they want action, various kinds of actions that are permitted in the plays. So, this audience was not just concentrated on following the dialogue. You see, today, if you don't follow the dialogue, a modern European play or even a modern Hindi play or a modern Indian Bangla play will not make much sense to you. Because modern Indian theatre, urban theatre, is entirely based on dialogue. Because this genre of theatre is not Indian. It's a European theatre. This is the theatre which was born in late 16th century Europe, when it was revived after studying Aristotle. So they said these are the 6 things that come from Aristotle, and they revived it. They could not revive song, they could not revive dance, because these are very practical arts which can't be recreated by reading books. And so they made a dialogue-based theatre. And this was the theatre that flourished, closed in between by the Puritans, but then it flourished till 19th century when it came to India. And then this was the theatre which was revived as urban theatre in India, and it was patterned after the European theatre. So we had the birth of Bengali theatre, Hindi theatre, Tamil theatre, etc. in late 19th century and earlier 20th century here. This is modern urban Indian theatre, but ancient Indian theatre was more like Kudiyattam. It was more like Teyyam, or it was more like Kathakali or Bailata. These forms which are traditional forms. Or they were the dramas which were full of song and dance. There was more song and dance in there. And that was part of the script. Not the dialogue script which the playwright wrote, but the performance script. And so many things were inserted into the performance by the director and by the actor himself. He would be creating them there and then. So many interactions, so many interpretations of the dialogue, they would be created there and then on the stage, and he even had the freedom to create his own dialogue. And the audience would assess it, and if they liked it, they would say once more and once more. So this was a highly participatory kind of theatre in which the audience was very important. Now Natya Shastra describes the nature of the audience in different parts of India. There is a technical term for it called pravritti. I don't have time today to explain to you the 11 elements of ancient Indian theatre, but one important was pravritti. And pravritti was the taste of the Indian audience in different parts of India. So Natya Shastra, more than 2000 years ago, described very clearly that people in Tamil Nadu, that is present day Tamil Nadu, people in South, Dakshinatya, they are very fond of song and dance. So dear actors and actresses, when you go and perform in south of India, bring in more song and dance there. Do certain things so that your audience enjoys them more. Adjust your performance accordingly. And you would, if you give them more song and dance and innovation, they'll enjoy it. If you go to Bengal, I mean present day Bengal, but East India, then try to be more bombastic than usual. Because Bengalis love a lot of rhetoric. I don't know if it is true today, maybe it is, but that's what Bharat Muni prescribed. He said people in that region, they like Vak Adambar. They like big speeches, long speeches, they like the flourish of words. If you go to north, where our Jat brothers live, then they like a lot of action. They like a lot of fighting. And if you go to east, then people are more thoughtful. They don't get into a fight that easily. Gujaratis don't do that even now. They have a business to watch. So these are some of the prescriptions, broad prescriptions made by Natya Shastra. Now what does this prove? This shows that Natya Shastra is talking about all India audience. And the performers were all India also. Because they came from different parts of the country. You will not have that variety, you will not have that egalitarian setup unless the actors and the performers also came from various parts of the country. So this was the linguistic situation for ancient Indian theatre. And if you imagine it, it was a very, very different thing from present day theatre. But it was. Now you don't find these things, these songs, all kinds of gestural actions in a play script. You see, a playwright like Kalidas would only write the dialogue. And very often, even the dialogue in successive editions would undergo change. Professor Vasant Kumarji, whom you know, I'm sure some of you know, those who are acquainted with Sanskrit studies, he has prepared a beautiful edition as to how Kalidas's Abhigyan Shakuntalam changed over time, and people even changed the part, the dialogues. They expanded on certain verses, they deleted certain verses, they inserted certain verses. So you see, ancient Indian theatre was a highly interactive thing, a highly creative thing, and it would depended a lot upon the requirements of the audience. Said, we must go to the next question. Did the genres as described in the Natya Shastra, the 10 genres, Dasharupakas, did they stay the same way over centuries or over millenniums? Did they not also undergo a change? Did they not also transform? Yes, they transformed. They also underwent a change. Some of the dramatic genres described, like Samavakar, like Ihambrek, they became extinct very early. So you don't have any great plays surviving in them. There are hardly any plays. Some of the genres, they underwent so much change that they disappeared in their own name and they acquired various other names. And so many sub-regional forms developed. For instance, Abhinav Gupta mentions a form, a genre, which seems very, very popular in his time. It was called Dombika, performed probably by Dome. Many people think that Domes are the performers who, went out of India, and they are the Rom or the Gypsies. They are the performers. Now, he gives detailed description of this form. Now, this is not a form which is mentioned by Bharat Muni. So obviously it is one of those genres which developed. And dozens of genres like this developed over centuries. They flourished for a while and then they merged into something new. So the later text, medieval texts of performance, like Sangeet Ratnakar, they mention a large number of these small performances and these genres. Now these genres were not always full-fledged genres. Sometimes they were very small for a very specific purpose. Like Lavani is mentioned. Now Lavani today is nothing but a small dance, but it seems from earlier description that it was a dramatic performance and that it had characters in it. So Natya Shastra was not a text which said, we prescribe you this, keep doing this again and again and again and stick to the rules. It gave the rules, but these were the rules which would be used creatively by the performers. So it gave the rules of acting and the kinds of acting, and it made an analysis of acting that all acting would be of 4 kinds: Angik, Vachik, Satvik and Aharya. But then how to go on creating their combination, how to go on creating a variety, this would be left to the performer and to the audience also. So the reason why you see such immense variety in ancient Indian theatre and the forms that followed it is precisely this. Because this was an open-ended or an open-minded tradition. Now let me give you an example. Something from what you can understand as a modern example. We have this great song called Geet Govinda, obviously composed sometime in 11th century by Jayadev. And we know that this was done in Jagannath Puri, and it was written, and he was greatly in love with this Padmavati, called himself Padmavati Charana Chakravarti. Now this song was composed by him, and then it was danced in that temple. Obviously, a whole tradition of the dancing, those Ashtapadis developed. And these Ashtapadis became temple dances. Remember, Yesterday I talked about how with the coming of Islam, the urban theatre disappeared in the whole of North. So these performers had to find refuge or had to find their living, creativity or whatever in great temple complexes wherever they survived or in ashramas. So they took these various aspects of performance and readjusted them to tell stories which were more suitable to performance in a temple before bhaktas and not before a secular audience. So new genres were created. Ashtapadi of Jayadev came at a time when new things were needed for temple dances. So it came in 12th century, and then from one part of India it travelled to the rest of the country. You have a version of it in Sanskrit, the original, and that was danced all over India as it is danced even now. You have Jayadev's Ashtapadis being danced in Bharatnatyam, in Tamil Nadu, in Kerala, in Mohiniyattam. Even some people have tried doing it in Kathak, although that is a revival. And of course in Odissi. And then in Andhra, in Kuchipudi, yes. So it travelled all over. At the same time, the Sanskrit text was retranslated or it was rewritten in fresh compositions of the same paradigm, using the same paradigm to make new compositions. And that is how a combination of Sanskrit and the local language you can see even today in Kuchipudi, in performances like Bhama Kalapam, or in Terukuttu, or in Bailata. All these things are still living. This is how the performance got translated again and again for regional purposes, and it travelled to various parts of India, and it changed from one genre or from one art form to another. So sometimes even just the musicians would take the song and sing it as a song to be sung, not as a text to be danced. Therefore, you find so many modern North Indian thumaris written in Brij Bhasha which are repeating the lines of original Brij Bhasha, original Jayadev. There is a Ashtapadi of Jayadev called Yahi Madhava Yahi Keshava Makuru Kaitava Vadam. Go Krishna, don't play tricks on me, don't be a cheat. Now the same verse you find dozens and dozens of North Indian thumri, Jaja main to se nahi bolu, Rar Karat Samvariya, etc., etc. So this whole freedom to refurbish or to re-render or to recreate was practiced in the performing arts. You see, they never believed in copyright. They allowed their kriti or their composition to be retranslated or to be made again by somebody else. And this was done primarily because what was the Ras Siddhanta? Now let me say a few words just in last 5-7 minutes. I'll try to perform this task of talking about rasa. What is rasa? Rasa iti ko padartha. This is a question that Natya Shastra is. What is this substance? What is this stuff called rasa? And after asking this question, the Natya Shastra gives the answer, aswadyatvat. That which is worthy of being tasted. Rasa is that, it is that element, it is that substance, it is that creation which is worthy of being tasted. Not that which can be tasted, because we can taste anything. Anything good or bad, not palatable or not good for society. That doesn't mean that something which can be tasted, which can be enjoyed, is rasa. If you enjoy the wrong things, then that is not rasa. So if you enjoy violence in a manner that it has not transmuted into a higher level of art and contemplation, then it is not rasa. If you are just enjoying gross violence or gross sex or any emotion that way, then it is not rasa. Rasa is when the transmutation takes place. And what is it that gets transmuted? It is your bhava, your feeling. Now, the Natya Shastra goes on to describe that there are certain permanent 8 states of the human mind, heart, or human psychology, which are there in every person, and through a dramatic performance, they undergo some kind of a transcendence and a transmutation. They become more sattvic, or they become more sophisticated. And when your own feelings become more sophisticated, more elevated, when there is an emotional upsurge, then that upsurge in the context of theatre, drama, natya, or art or kavya is called rasa. So it is my own feelings that undergo a transmutation. They undergo an elevation. And they go under an elevation in which they are free from normal everyday likes and dislikes. When I transcend myself, my own personal perception as a person, and just become as somebody who is capable of looking things in the deepest manner, in the most universal manner, then I enjoy rasa. So this is very briefly what is rasa. And rasa is the aim of all dramatic performance. Everything that you do on stage, everything that you see on stage must result in rasa. Unless it results in rasa, the purpose of a stage performance is not achieved. Because the Natya Shastra makes it very clear that art has this special quality. It has the special quality of rasa. It gives you rasa which life does not. All the activities that we do in life, they are full of some kind of a contradiction. They are full of likes and dislike. So I like somebody for some reason, I dislike somebody for some reason. Or I am just not concerned, I am indifferent. But the capacity of art is to raise my feelings beyond likes and dislikes and indifference, so that I can enjoy an emotional state, let us say a state of love, without any possibility of an interference. You see, all emotions in life, the best of the times, we are threatened by something. I may be very happy sitting somewhere and I'm saying I'm having a good time, but at the back of the mind there is some kind of a fear that this may not last, that there may be an intervention, that there may be some kind of a sudden change, and I'm more worried about that, right? This is the situation in life, but in art that situation changes. I am into an emotion beyond any kind of a possibility of somebody obstructing it. I am able to enter that emotion through a transcendence and taste something of that emotion that I never taste in life. That's why Abhinav Gupta calls it Nirvighna Pratiti. That is, I taste that emotion. I taste that bhava. Emotion doesn't mean just sentiment, it also means a state of mind. Without any interference, without any discoloring, I enjoy it in its purity, without obstruction. So, enjoying my own emotion, my own self, through the medium of art, through the medium of acting, which I see on stage, all the art that is done there is rasa. And the purpose of Indian theatre was to bring rasa within the audience. Now, of course, there are many debates as to where is rasa. Is it in the actor? Is it in the audience? Is it in the writer, etc.? But apart from that, it is very clear that whenever you see a great work of art, when you are close to it, in no matter what language or what time or place it is, whether it is Shakespeare or Kalidas or Rabindranath Tagore or Potana or whatever, you have that elevation, you have that upsurge and a perception of something which you will never get by anything worldly, by any philosophy or by any perception of or any darshana. It is a first-hand experience that you get by experiencing theatre or music or painting or anything which can be called artistic. So we stop here today and we invite questions now. We've invented this term as a neologism called Shastri, classical music, Shastriya Sangeet. My guru used to say, bad music is ashastriya, good music is shastriya. Whether it is a village boy singing it, or if it is a great ustad singing it. If a great ustad is singing terrible music, that's not shastriya. So, see, the Natya Shastra makes a category of Uttam, Madhyam and Adham. Bad art, medium, passable art, and great art. And it describes what is great art. In the 27th chapter, Siddhi Adhyaya, there is you are told what is great art. You see, they don't describe art in terms of the social status to which social class to which it may belong. Like classical is supposed to belong to the elite. In Natya Shastra, you don't do that. In Natya Shastra, you talk about Daivi Siddhi. Have you pleased the gods? Is your art so great that even gods are happy? Or is your art good enough so that you are getting Padma Shris and various awards? So, and money. That's what they are more. They want you to reach the height of rasa, the depth or height or whatever you call it. So I think if you go back to the old categorizations, then such questions would not arise or trouble you at least.
Thank you, sir. The next question is from Rachna, who's talking about the departure of our modern art and modern culture from ancient systems of knowledge. And she's asking, is there a way to return to those ancient systems and traditions of making art?
You see, let me say very clearly, there is no return. There is only future. The past is past, number one. But when the past is revisited with an intention to recreate it, then it takes you into the future. Now here I'll take an example not from India, but I will take an example from Europe and give it the due credit. The theatre of Greece was put an end to by Christians. They said this is devilish, this is bad. So there was no theatre. In 16th century or 15th century, they started reviving theatre in Europe. How? They had no theatre of their own. Christianity had something like morality plays, etc. So they went back, if you want to put it that way, they went back to the Greeks. And they read Aristotle and all the ancient plays. And they started recreating their theatre, which was the theatre of Christopher Marlowe, Shakespeare, Racine, and later on, centuries later, Goethe and all these people. So they created a new form of theatre. It was not a replica of ancient Greek theatre. As a matter of fact, they went very far from ancient Greek theatre. And modern Europeans have a very poor understanding of original Greek theatre. But they did create a new theatre. They did create something for the future. And it was so effective that it traveled right across to other continents. So, if we make use of Natya Shastra to rewrite plays, what kinds of plays? It depends on our creativity. We can begin by some old models. For instance, a student of mine, she has written a prahasan or a satire in the old style, but on a very modern theme of how the artists are pursuing Padma Shris and this and that these days and running after publicity and not. So she has written a play, a spoof on all these Khan Sahabs, etc. And it is drawing on something ancient, but it is very contemporary. So that's what I think. You can make modern Indian theatre multilingual by using 2, 3, 4 languages in it. It's not just my flight of imagination. It can be something very practical. Yeah.
Thank you, sir. The next questions are from YouTube. One is asking which was the older language between Sanskrit and Tamil with respect to ancient theatre in India?
Look, as a linguist, I'm not competent to answer this because I don't read classical Tamil, and so I can't judge. But what I see in the Natya Shastra, etc., Natya Shastra talks of Dramid as a regional language. And it does not talk of it as a highly sophisticated language. But remember, Natya Shastra is a very, very old text. It's about 5th, 6th century BC, this present edition. So that's what the Natya says. And I have edited a couple volumes on this, on Silapaddigaram and Tolkappiyam, with the cooperation of Nagaswamiji. So for all the details on this, you can read these 2 volumes, where it is shown that Tolkappiyam is actually following Natya Shastra. It's not something which people from Tamil Nadu would accept very readily, but that's how the texts are.
Sir, which works of Abhinavagupta on rasas would you recommend to scholars, and what is yet to be translated from the original Sharda in which Abhinavagupta wrote?
No, Sharda is only a script. Sharda is not a language, you see. This connection of a script and a language is very modern. So in till 15th, 16th century, all languages, all Indian languages were written in all kinds of scripts, depending on the utility and the region. Abhinav Gupta's work on Natya Shastra is Abhinav Bharati. Now that has been translated, portions of it has been translated, but not the whole of it. And I believe some scholars, probably Radha Vallabh Tripathi, has translated the whole of it into English. So you can read that in English, but his work on Natya Shastra is Abhinav Bharati. He has other works, plenty of works on Tantra, but the work on Natya Shastra is Abhinav Bharati. Abhinav Gupta is Abhinav Bharati.
Okay.
Yeah.
So another question is,
Yeah.
did ancient Indian theatre ever get exported along the sea routes, or was it restricted to just the country?
Oh, you mean did it travel outside India?
Yes, yes.
Well, as far as I know, the impact of Natya Shastra, and that means practically the theatre of the times, in the Eastern world was massive. You see, all the performing arts right up to Japan, including some of the traditions of China, and of course of Burma, Cambodia, Vietnam, etc., they are all heavily influenced by Natya Shastra. All of them. So these are all the forms you can see, particularly if you see some of the dancing in Bali today or in Thailand, then you can see its closeness with Odissi. And as a matter of fact, in Japan, we have a 13th century work by Xiami, which in many ways follows certain principles of the Natya Shastra. So the impact of Natya Shastra was immense. And remember one thing more. Natya Shastra is also the mother of sculpture. Indian sculpture is something that has born out of Natya Shastra. Because iconography comes from Angik Abhinay, Angaharas, Karanas and Angaharas. And Karanas and Angaharas are very clearly, in great detail, given to us in Natya Shastra. And then the whole concept of making the body a location for a god was called Pindi Bandha. And yesterday I briefly indicated that. I've written a paper which is in circulation now. So when you bring a god into your body and you make an icon of that god, an idol, in English you'll call an idol of that god, then you make that god sakar, or in form, in vigraha. Now this whole process is because of the theory proposed in Natya Shastra and the description given in the 4th chapter of the Natya Shastra. It explicitly describes that whole thing, the process of Pindi Bandha. So it was sculpture, and along with sculpture, the architecture and the concept of the body as the location of the divine and house of the divine. This is again from Natya Shastra, which travels and flowers into what is called the Vastu Shastra. Because once you make your body the temple by putting the God in it, then you make a house for God. That is, then you make a mansion for God, or a mandira for God. But the first thing is how to bring the God into your body. So it is the theatre of avatar, as I say. The theater of avatar. The gods are on stage. And that's the most distinctive quality of Indian theater. And by the way, of Greek theater also, because ancient Greek theater, gods are all the time prancing around on the stage. So it's the same concept.
Thank you, sir. The next question is from Ivana Bhaduri, who's asking, can we say that the process of refurbishing or re-rendering of art was allowed or accepted because the ultimate or prime purpose of art is rasanubhuti, transcending the mundane to evolve into a sahridaya?
Exactly. You've put it very well.
Thank you, sir. We'll take up a few questions that came in yesterday as well.
Yeah.
One is asking, was Nukkad Natak performed in the ancient times?
Oh yes, I told you about a form called Vithi. Now Vithi was a single person, like a stand-up comedy, performing something. So obviously such kind of a stand-up comedy is not done all the time, or hardly ever done in ancient times in a theatre house. It is something done on the street or a street corner or a temple corner. So Nukkad Natak is just a modern name for this old thing. And there is a description of very small theatre houses, triangular theatre houses in the Natya Shastra. It seems that they were never made in medieval times. They simply disappeared. But the ancient theatre house description has them. So yes, Nukkad Natak was there all the time. And so many of these forms which you have today, like Babuji Ki Phad in Gujarat, they all come from that Nukkad Natak.
Thank you, sir. So was miming a part of ancient theatre practicing or production?
Yeah, you see, the Natya Shastra is talking about the actor. And it uses a very technical term called vibhava. So it lays down that it is not only a human body which can be an actor. It can be some other device also. So a doll, puttalika, or something made out of charma or out of skin, that is mime, that can also be the actor. The medium is not something they are conservative about. They are open. That's why I always say that cinema is theatre. According to Natya Shastra, anything which takes drishya and shravya, something which is seen and heard as together, is theatre, is natya. So the comprehensive definition of natya includes all these different performing arts and maybe art forms which will develop in the future.
Yes, sir. So we'll take our final question.
Right.
Even yesterday, where Mahesh Bhaskar on YouTube asked, when did the Ram Leela tradition start?
All right. Now let's put it this way. You see, when you say Ram Leela, then you are talking by definition of the modern Ram Leela. That is this modern Ram Leela. Now this modern Ram Leela is only 200 to 300 years old, not very old. And it began around Banaras and it still is the original. There are several books on this, and Richard Schechner was the first one who came and saw the depth of it and the this art form of Ram Leela as performed in Banaras, this gave him the idea of what he called later on environmental theatre. That is, theatre is not just within a theatre house, but it is in a big location, which is a community location. And that location keeps shifting. So in Ram Leela of Banaras, it is played in one part of the city one day, another part of the city another day. It goes around traveling for 10 days, covering the whole of the city. So this is the present day Ram Leela. And this present day Ram Leela belongs to the tradition of performance which goes back to Natya Shastra. But then, let's put it another way, your question, or let's give another dimension to your question. Was the story of Rama performed in ancient times or not? Obviously it was. We have very, very ancient plays there. And let me tell you something. Valmiki never wrote down his Ramayana. We know that Mahabharata was written down by Ganesha, and Vyas said, okay, come sit down. I need somebody who must write down these verses. But Valmiki, he composed the verses and he taught those verses to his disciples to begin with to Lava and Kusha, and they were the singing minstrels of the Ramayana. So the story of Ramayana, for I don't know for how long, was sung, at least as it is, as the description is given in the Ramayana itself. It was first of all sung or performed in the court of Rama himself. So it was sung there. In other words, it was performed. Now, of course, we have doubting Thomases today who say that Ram was created in 12th, 13th century as a consequence of Islamic invasions and blah, blah, blah. But then there are dozens and dozens of texts and plays also. The plays of Bhasa, Balaramayan, and plays of other playwrights, so many other playwrights, which are on the story of Ram. They are not Valmiki, but they are portions from Valmiki recreated with new kinds of things. And then of course you have the great text by 6th or I think 5th or 6th century poet, this great poet, very strangely the name slips out, who wrote Uttar Ramacharitam, Bhavbhuti. So this is 5th, 6th century. And obviously these plays didn't come out of the blue. There was a tradition of these plays. You see, in a literary tradition, certain great high points survive. The average plays, they get lost. So there must have been dozens and dozens of plays. Prasanna Raghavam is another play. I'm not such a scholar of Sanskrit literature, but a good scholar would give you at least 20 plays, names of 20 plays on Rama, story of Rama. And it was enacted, enacting Rama is essential to the well-being of India, because whereas enacting Mahabharata has a cathartic effect. It goes to show what is the real human condition. The story of Ram shows you what are the possibilities of human achievements, how high man, woman can rise. See, that is Ramayana. And that has been recognized right from the earliest text. Because the Ramayana opens with this vision. That the question is asked by Narada, by Valmiki to Narada, whom shall I talk about? Who is the perfect and the most dharmagya, dharma vigraha? And Narada says Ram. And that is why Valmiki wrote Ramayana, and that is why people are enacting Ramayana.
Bharaji, I think the time has come to thank you very warmly for these two wonderful lectures, and I remind you that you were our last speaker